throughout the rest of the night. So I think from about South Wales through to Essex or Suffolk, there will be some outbreaks of rain coming along, perhaps a little bit of sleet mixed in as well over the highest hills. Further to the north, many places having clear skies, so a cold night with some slippery roads by the morning. But in these northwestern parts, still a fair number of showers coming in, and some of those showers could be quite heavy with hail, and they'll be wintry too. So I think over the Scottish mountains particularly, a fair bit of snow before the night's out. Now already temperatures are dropping below freezing in the Scottish glens, and as the night goes on, so we'll find a frost setting in just about everywhere from about the North Midlands northwards, and in one or two places a fairly sharp frost at that. And then tomorrow in the south we'll have that cloud and rain around to begin with, but I think very gradually during the course of the day it will move off onto the continent, brighter and drier weather coming across from the west, but it'll be quite late probably before it brightens up in the extreme southeast. Many other parts, at least the sheltered spots, having a dry day with some sunshine, but again these showers running into those northern and northwestern areas, and some of them once more could be quite heavy with hail. And I think as the day goes on, they'll turn increasingly wintry, so a fair amount of sleet and snow coming down in those showers, but really probably only causing problems over the hills. A coldish day tomorrow in many places, but with lighter winds and the sunshine between the showers. It won't feel too bad, but 7 or 8 is the mid-40s. That's all for now. A very good evening to you.
In 10 minutes, John Davidson cooperates with the Q.E.D. team to examine the distressing nervous disorder from which he suffers, Tourette's syndrome. This is BBC One. Now the budget. The Shadow Chancellor of the Exchequer, the Right Honourable John Smith MP, speaks for the opposition.
Good evening. 12 months ago, the Chancellor of the Exchequer introduced a budget that was foolhardy and unfair. This year, we're all living with the consequences. Coping with high interest rates, a record deficit in our overseas trade, and the worst rate of inflation of the major industrialised nations. And this year's budget will do nothing to tackle these serious economic problems. Mr. Lawson described his budget last year as a milestone. But for the majority of people in Britain, the Chancellor's milestone has become a millstone around their necks. Higher and higher interest rates are hurting industry and have sharply increased the cost of living. The Chancellor showered tax cuts on the richest members of our society and gave the green light to borrow and spend as never before. But as a result of the Tory spend now, pay later credit boom, British industry has become overstretched and unable to prevent a surge in foreign imports from our major competitors in Germany, Japan and the United States. So Britain has plunged massively into the red. We are living beyond our means and unable to pay our way in the world. In 1987, we imported £2.7 billion more than we exported. Last year, Mr. Lawson forecast that the deficit would further increase to £4 billion. But in fact, the deficit for 1988 was 5 times worse, plummeting to well over £14 billion. But it's not just the trade deficit that has proved troublesome for the government. The Chancellor's forecast for the rate of inflation has also proved to be completely wrong. One wonders if Mr. Lawson has a clue about what is happening to our economy. Last year he said the inflation rate would be 4%, but now it has risen almost twice as high, to nearly 8%. To make matters worse, it is the government itself that has caused these inflationary own goals. They are responsible for the heavy extra charges for water, electricity, public transport and NHS prescriptions, which for most of us sharply increase the cost of living. And of course, higher and higher interest rates make borrowing especially costly for homeowners. Because of last year's soaring interest rates from 7.5% to 13%, for many, 1989 is becoming a year of mortgage misery. The huge increase in the cost of borrowing has more than wiped out last year's income tax cuts for many people. Take a married couple with 2 children earning £12,000 per year. Their income tax cuts after the 1988 budget amounted to an extra £12 per month. But if the same family is paying off a £25,000 home loan, they are now paying an extra £42 per month in mortgage payments. Mr. Lawson gives £12 with one hand, but takes £42 back with the other. These crippling mortgage bills make a mockery of the Chancellor's so-called tax giveaway last year. Mr. Lawson indeed chose tax cuts for the rich rather than invest long-term in Britain's economic future. What he should have done was to invest more on education and training to reduce the skill shortages that harm so many British companies, more on improving our roads and railways to ease congestion, reduce pollution, and promote safety, more on the National Health Service to retain more qualified nurses and improve the quality of health care in Britain. Every opinion poll shows that better roads, better hospitals, better schools are what the British people want. And all the evidence shows that this would be good for the British economy. We need to invest in the talents of our people so that Britain can produce quality goods that other countries want to buy. And as we approach the 1990s, we must transform our economy. We need an economic miracle so that we can compete successfully against the Germans, Japanese, Americans in the world marketplace. That is why the Labour Party's priority is investment. Investment in training, in education, in research, and in regional development. He has so mismanaged the credit boom that he cannot risk spending on these priorities because of his fears about inflation and the trade deficit. But prudent long-term investment would be the best way to curb inflation and improve our ability to compete abroad. Public investment is not just vital to strengthen our economy. For most of us, it is the key to improving the quality of our lives. Across the range of public services, in health, education, water, the environment and transport, the effects of underinvestment and penny pinching over the years of Conservative government have reduced quality, safety and efficiency. Let me give you just one example. Scientists in Bristol have found a way of making chickens resistant to salmonella. They need just £150,000 to test their work in field conditions. So far, the Ministry of Agriculture has refused to provide the necessary funds. And this when the Chancellor has a surplus of over £14,000 million. There are, of course, some items in this year's budget which we welcome. 10 years after it was promised, Mr. Lawson has abolished the earnings rule for pensioners. He has given a tax preference to the use of lead-free petrol. He has reduced national insurance contributions at the lower end of the earnings scale. I wish, however, he had done more for the lower paid. He increased income tax personal allowances by the bare minimum he was obliged to, and by an amount that is less than the present rate of inflation and below the increase in average earnings. As a result, the proportion of income paid in income tax, even for the lowest paid, will increase. The Chancellor has done nothing at all for many others. The freezing of child benefit at £7.25 per week is a scandal. Child benefit replaced a children's tax allowance, which would have been updated every year if the Conservatives had kept to an all-party agreement to do so. Every time the Conservatives refuse to uprate child benefit, they deny even modest help to poorer families and their children. And of course, the living standards of the most vulnerable in our society will fall still further this year, because the Chancellor has chosen to increase pensions and unemployment benefit by less than 6%, even though he told us yesterday that inflation will reach 8% this year. But it is hardly surprising that this government overlooks the less well-off. One change he made, we strongly oppose. That is the proposal to give preferential tax treatment for private medical insurance for people above retirement age. It is an open-ended subsidy to all such payments for private medical care, whether paid for by a pensioner or someone else on their behalf, perhaps on the higher rate of tax. The most stringent tests of income and capital are applied to pensioners who seek income support or housing benefit. Even modest savings can disqualify a pensioner from any help. But to promote private medicine, there are no such restrictions or qualifications. The richest can benefit without inquiry or means tests of any kind. It is interesting, is it not, that the Conservatives lose all interest in targeting when the benefit helps the better off and the object is privilege. This is not a budget of much substance, but it is highly revealing. It reveals how fearful and defensive Mr. Lawson has become as he contemplates the results of his misguided economic policies. He has been forced to promise to maintain high interest rates for as far ahead as he can see. With falling growth, rising inflation, and a worsening deficit in our overseas trade, our economy is clearly not under wise or prudent supervision. But rather than recognize the real economic problems of the trade deficit and high interest rates, this government blindly adheres to its absolute faith that market forces belong in all aspects of our lives. So this year, we face the privatization of both water and electricity, and the commercialization of education and the health service. These errors and such dogmatism are no basis for the nation to meet the challenges that face us all in the decade ahead.
That was the Shadow Chancellor of the Exchequer, the Right Honourable John Smith MP, and the programme will be shown again at 10:20 on BBC2.
On Crimewatch UK, police need your help to find a gang of robbers in Middlesbrough who smashed their way into a jeweller's shop and stole over £26,000 worth of rings. Did you see them as they made their getaway? Or can you help to solve the murder of estate agent Lionel Webb, who was shot dead in his North London office? Who were the men who called on him the day he died? That's Crimewatch UK, tomorrow night at 9:40.
The acrobatic Pairs Free programme features in the world figure skating from Paris in Sportsnight in half an hour, plus European football and racing from Cheltenham. And now Q.E.D, which this week looks at a neurological disorder, Tourette's syndrome. This medical problem can cause its sufferers to use obscenities involuntarily, and some viewers may find the language in this programme offensive.